Fastline Auctions, the ultimate destination for online farm equipment auctions. Looking to list equipment? Fastline Auctions knows farmers, and farmers have trusted Fastline for their equipment needs for over 45 years. With unmatched digital reach and direct-to-farmer catalogs, they can find the right buyer for your equipment. Not to mention, they have the industry's lowest commission rates. If you're looking for equipment to buy, you can bid with confidence. No buyer premiums, no reserves, just integrity. Fastline Auctions, your trusted platform for hassle-free, cost-effective farm equipment auctions. Visit fastline.com for more information. That's fastline.com. Engineer Bert R. Benjamin had a vision, an all-purpose tractor that could service the growing number of farms across North America. With that, in 1923, the first Farmall prototype was born. For a century, the Farmall tractor transformed farming, generation after generation, a symbol of modern farming since its inception. Today, legacy Farmall tractors and modern ones are found all around the world, still incredibly reliable, still all-purpose as ever, still loved by all. To celebrate 100 years of Farmall, Case IH is giving away a Case IH Farmall Utility 75C tractor. Join the celebration and enter for your chance to win at farmall100.com. That's farmall100.com.
Stories behind the ag brands we love and the ag brands we love to hate. What color is your tractor? With Chrissy Wozniak.
Hi, I'm Chrissy Wozniak, and welcome to What Color is Your Tractor? Today, we get to speak with an inspirational author, photographer, and publisher. He and his camera have climbed the Julian Alps, explored breweries on 4 continents, and ridden backcountry motorcycle routes in the Bolivian Amazon, the Australian Outback, and the island of Hokkaido, Japan. He spent over 30 years publishing great stories. And as an editor and publisher, he's overseen the development of some of the most respected and best-selling books in the equipment and transportation niche. His publishing company, Octane Press, publishes award-winning illustrated and narrative books. He's created with companies like Case IH, Ferrari, and Caterpillar, just to name a few. As of this year, Octane Press has published more than 200 books, won 30 independent book awards, and reached more than 1 million readers. Today, we're going to be discussing his latest book, set to be released soon, called Farmall Century. From Austin, Texas, I'd like to welcome Lee Klancher. Welcome, Lee, and thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me, Chrissy. It's great to be here.
So I personally have 3 of your absolutely beautiful books. They decorate my living room. I even have one of the collector's edition of red combines in the brown case. It's so beautiful. Case IH graciously sent them to me after having them on this podcast. They're called Red Tractors, Red 4-Wheel Drive Tractors, and Red Combines. And this summer, we have a new book coming out, Farmall Century. So can you tell me about this new book?
Absolutely, Chrissy. We've been doing, obviously, these things since 2013, and we've kind of covered all the other eras of the Farmall tractor, or the Case IH tractors, I should say. And this year being the 100th anniversary of the Farmall tractor, we thought it was the perfect time to go back, kind of complete the set, and cover Farmall tractors from the very beginning of International Harvester in 1902 up until 1958. We cover that real detailed. And then we actually cover the evolution of the Farmall brand as it was badged on tractors all the way up to today. So our books, I would say they are kind of a mix of visuals and engaging text. So you're going to see every model of tractor in there. So if you happen to be a collector or an enthusiast, you want to know what a Farmall Super MDV looks like, it's going to be in the book. There'll be a picture. So it has a encyclopedic value. But I also do a lot of work to make sure there's great personal stories that help you understand the history. And we did that with modern Case IH and IH, and the executives would tell us these stories, or the guy on the line would have great stories. And those personal stories in the books, I think, really make you understand the history and understand the people and personalities that are behind these machines.
Right. And what's your connection with agriculture?
I grew up in farm country in northern Wisconsin. My grandfather was a dairy farmer. My dad was a teacher. So, but he actually bought a house on a working farm. So my neighbors were all farmers. I grew up right on a farm. And that was, hey, it was a rural community I grew up in.
Yeah, that's interesting. Your father, a teacher, grandfather, a farmer, and you just went right there in the middle. That's pretty neat.
Absolutely. Absolutely. My grandfather was really interesting. He was a farmer, and then he drove the county grader, and that was his business career. Very good, very progressive farmer. But he always told me since I was little, he said, you should do whatever you like to do, because wherever you go, they'll need good people. And, he never stepped inside of a corporation bigger than the local co-op, but it's good advice. And it helped me, go a lot of different places. So.
Yeah, that's great advice. And so what led you to write books about machinery? What's your history, and what made you fall in love with telling stories?
Well, it started with me with books. So I started reading when I was super young. There's a great picture my mom has of me in a laundry basket. I'm probably 5 with a book. And since I was very small, mom could give me a book and I'm good. So I read the entire science fiction section of our local library. I literally read every book. So I was a voracious reader as a kid, but I also became a pretty heavy gearhead. I loved particularly motorcycles. When I was 11, I finally got one of my uncles had an old one around. He gave us for $25. So I had a bike and loved working on them, loved riding them, loved racing them. That really grew into a really deep passion. And in college, I studied engineering briefly, and then worked for a local, worked for the university science magazine, the engineering magazine. Ran that, and I eventually switched to journalism. Got a degree in journalism. The higher level of physics sort of sunk me. But once I got into journalism, through my work with that magazine, local book publishers saw what I was doing, and they were publishing books, and they were looking for somebody that could bring a little bit more engineering and tech to their line of tractor books. And said, hey, would you like to author a tractor book? And I was 25. I was like, are you kidding? Yes, I'd love to do that. And when I did that, I went to a local tractor show, because I knew a lot about cars and motorcycles. I was a big enthusiast, but tractors, and I'd driven a lot of tractors, but they weren't a passion for me at that time. So I went to a local show just to figure it out. And I was taking a picture of an old Farmall regular, and I kind of squeezed in close with my camera to take that picture. And the smell of, how old tractors smell with the burnt oil and, just the years of stuff on them burning off. It's very distinct. And I had this very visceral reminder of my grandfather. And my grandfather and I were super close. My dad doesn't really care about cars and machines. He doesn't mind them, but he's not a gearhead in any sense. He was, he likes baseball and books and things. Grandpa, though, did love machinery, and so did I. So we always kind of had this connection. And when that snapped, my grandfather had died, I think 6 years before that, I just felt like the world was telling me, hey, this is something you should do. So I went back to the company, and I probably wasn't going to say no, because, 26-year-old isn't going to say no to a check to do anything. But I mean, in terms of writing, but that was definitely a moment where it struck me.
Amazing. And where does photography fit in here? Where did that come in?
So photography, I just was going to be a writer. And I really took this class from a great teacher, and she was an avid freelance writer and was teaching us how to be freelance writers. And at one point during the class, she said, look, you need to learn to use a camera, and I'll tell you why. She said, photographers, 90% of them are flakes. She said, they're going to give you an assignment, they're going to send you out, and the photographer is going to be hungover or forget or not show up. And if you can't take a picture, then you're sunk. You don't get any money. So she said, learn how to use a camera. So I took a class, and this wonderful guy, Randy Johnson, taught the class. He was crazy beat. Now, he was a typical photographer,
Yeah.
I see you smiling. I'm sure you've dealt with enough. There's a lot of wonderful personality in photography. And I did learn how to shoot. And I was working at the Minnesota tourism office at the time. I had a internship, a little more. I was a paid internship. And I convinced them to give me a couple of days off. I was going to the Boundary Waters to take pictures. And so I took pictures, and I came back, and I got this picture of my dad standing next to the canoe with the sunrise. It was gorgeous. And they made a poster out of it. It was on the front page of the newspaper. And I was like, wow, I can take a picture. I had no idea. So that was really the start, but I kept shooting professionally. It's just, if you're out there hustling and selling stories and things, just being able to shoot and write, you're cheaper for the newspaper or magazine. It worked out. I did a lot. I shot hockey professionally. I eventually got into shooting tractors, but I shot a lot of motorcycle travel and really developed a flair for the outdoors. I love the outdoors, love nature, spend a lot of time in it, and it really means a lot to me. And that was the photography that sort of got me.
Wow. That's really neat. So you must have just been, out on the road, having all these experiences. There must be some interesting stories while you've been creating these books. Can you tell us some of those?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. There are some great ones. One of my favorite pictures is I ended up riding a motorcycle across Australia, and that happened in 2000. I had a friend at a motorcycle magazine, and my life had changed and I really needed to do something. And I called him and I said, look, I've got a free ticket. I can go anywhere. I'm going to do a story for you. And a couple of days later, my phone rings at 4 a.m. I'm like, what the heck? And I pick it up, and it's this guy from Australia. And he said, hi, Lee, you're going to Australia. And I'm like, it's 4 a.m. I'm like, what the heck? So I ended up riding a motorcycle from Alice Springs, which is the middle of the country, to Cairns, which is the East Coast, beautiful little surfing town. And then from there, there's a road called the Telegraph Track. You can ride all the way to the northernmost tip of Australia. And that road in particular, the picture I was thinking of came in the middle. There was a what they call the loneliest tree in Australia. And there's a spot where all you can see is one flat road and one tree for miles. We stopped real near there, and there was a windmill within, say, 10 or 20 miles of that. We stopped at the windmill, and it was pumping water for cattle. And a guy in an old pickup truck drives up. And we started asking him, because we were really curious about like how these cattle even survived out here. It was so dry. And he said, oh, they're on my farm. He mentioned his farmhouse. We said, oh, where's your farmhouse? He says, oh, it's 50 miles away. It was all his land.
Wow.
50 miles. And I wish I remember, I think it was 7 cows per acre could survive in that.
That's insane. 7 cows an acre. Wow.
7 cows an acre. That was it. So yeah, that was a really neat place. And then when we went up on the Telegraph Track along the East Coast, that road is very lightly traveled and very difficult to ride because the water crossings are so deep. So the trucks that do it all have the big snorkels and are jacked up and are waterproofed, because you have to cross sometimes 6 feet of water.
Wow.
And there's a lot of saltwater crocodiles. So we heard stories about people getting, taken by crocs, and the beaches are beautiful. You get up there and the beaches are white sand. They're gorgeous. They're wide open. And they also have these signs, and the signs are huge. The signs must be 20 feet across. And they say, do not swim. There's jellyfish, saltwater crocs, and great white sharks.
Oh, wow.
Literally aren't supposed to swim. So anyway, so yeah, there was that's just one. There was, in those, especially the motorcycle travel days, oh my God, there were some good places.
I guess. Wow, what an adventurer. That's amazing. And now let's go back to Farmall a little bit.
Yeah, yeah.
This 100th anniversary year for Farmall. Can you walk us through what you learned about the evolution of the Farmall tractor?
Yeah, and there's so much. One of the really in the book where I really got in and got fascinated is the merger and digging it that created IH. That's just a really interesting story of, you have Cyrus McCormick and Charles Deering, these guys that have been around a long time, incredibly independent, built their own businesses, and they have to get together with three other companies under one roof to kind of survive and make a lot of money. It wasn't just survival. And that was all engineered by a man named George Perkins. And George, they were so difficult to deal with each other. When George got them together, he brought them all to New York, installed each of them into a separate hotel, and then went between the rooms for 2 weeks getting it all done.
Wow.
One of the guys swears he didn't know what was happening. He's J.J. Glessner. He's probably lying. But in court later, he did say under sworn testimony that he didn't even know. So getting these people together was very difficult. And then having, imagine, I don't know, take red and green these days, take all the executives, throw them into one room and say, guys, why don't you just work it out? It's going to be good. And, and this was a different era. These were, I think, even more independent-minded people. The first 10 years were kind of a rolling disaster. So all that's fun to read, and it helps you understand how they came about, or how the company sort of worked. It's also fascinating because they really had a monopoly, but they were very fair-minded. They didn't actually abuse that. And that came out in court. They were drugged through court for 20 years. And so they were very independent. They were not easy people, but they were also pretty ethical compared to some of the others like Jay Gould and Andrew Carnegie, who were just, those were guys, they were all about the money. And if you were in their way, you were toast. And the tractor moguls, if you like, were a little different.
Wow.
So that's a wonderful aspect. The Farmall tractor, of course, I realize that's all pre-Farmall. The formation of the Farmall is also a wonderful story. The company had the McCormick Deering tractors they were building. So it's 1920. So Henry Ford has come out with the Fordson. He's actually just destroying the market. He's taking all the sales, and they needed a machine that could cultivate as well as plow. Really, that's the innovation. Sounds very simple, but that's really the innovation that Farmall brought. The IH was this big corporation, right? And they finally just sort of got these guys tolerating each other and working together. It's been, almost 20 years. And they realize that if they don't answer Fordson, they're in trouble. Fordsons are selling in huge numbers and, killing their profit margin. So they decide they're going to build the McCormick Deering 1020 and 1530. And that's where the corporate guys think this is going to be it. And they've got tons of money into them. All their best and brightest are on it. Meantime, there's this guy, Bert Benjamin, and Ed Johnston, another engineer, that are building these funny looking 3-wheeled things and tricycle design things that are tipping over and look weird, and they run backwards and forward. And they're like, we don't want anything to do with that. And Benjamin and Johnston, and actually the company president at that time, Alex Legg, and Alex Legg, incidentally, came from Nebraska, was a cowboy, never had a college engineer, became the company president. Wonderful.
Wow.
Anyway, Benjamin has to sort of battle these corporate forces, and his machine turns out to be so good that it emerges, and the Farmall comes out, and it's, arguably the most important farm tractor of the 20th century. It's one of a very small handful, you could argue, that say that's the one.
That's so cool. And did you have a connection with Case to did they ask you to make this book, or did you just have a passion for it? How did that happen?
Case IH and I connected in way back. Anyway, I was an editor and I used to work with them, but in 2013, actually in 2012, I wanted to do a book about modern IH, and they had a Magnum anniversary. So we connected. Their licensing person, Sarah Pickett, is great and really got what I was trying to do. And honestly, so we did that book with the Magnum anniversary back in 2013. And then that was a license project. They were super helpful. And then on our second book, Red Combines, one of their executives, Jerry Salzman, was retiring. And Sarah, I was there at an event, and Sarah said, I think you and Jerry should work together on this book. And we did. And, that really upped my connection to that company, got really deep. Jerry knew everybody, had been around forever, was very, very forthcoming, really easy to talk to. And the relationship has deepened a lot where, there's a lot of people at that company I can call that'll help me out. And so we have close ties with them. They've continued to this day. It is a licensed book. But red has got a little special place in my heart. I've done green as well, but the Case IH people, I have some relationships that really mean a lot.
Oh, that's really neat. And the one thing I really enjoy about your books is not that just the big, gorgeous pictures, captivating history, but also the stories of kind of unique tractors and collections. Will the new book have that same diversity?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I always try to make sure my camera and I get somewhere you can't. I feel like that's your responsibility, right? When it comes down to it, basically. And certainly one of the special collections is John Kinzenbau's collection. John did a lot of work repowering tractors. He also has the, Kinsey. I think most people know Kinsey has the big blue wagons and built those fantastic machines. And John's just a wonderful story as well. Oh my God, such a talented young man. Oh. I got to see, he built a little, I think he took, don't quote me on which machines, but he took two machines and put them together and made a little 4-wheel drive, kind of articulated loader when he was, I want to say 19. He built it in his garage with a welder. It looks factory. It is beautiful. The welds are perfect. It looks finished. It doesn't look anything like somebody cobbled it together.
Oh yeah, that factory is one of my favorite factory tours of all time. And that museum in Ames, Iowa, if anyone wants to know where that is, but you should definitely, that's a bucket list tour to be on. It is incredible. And the story of his first tractor too.
Just wonderful. Yeah, you got to see it. And every time you walk around that place, so we did go, he's got a huge, his first tractor, I think his first family tractor was a Farmall. Certainly one of them was. He's got a huge collection of Farmalls, and nobody'd been in. So we got in. I spent 3 days with John taking pictures.
Wow.
It was great. But the place is so cool. Some of those buildings, almost everything, John will repurpose something. So he found like a factory that I think they almost gave him the pieces, and he literally built, he's got these 3-level things. So his tractors, they take forklifts and they can lift them up and slide them in 3 levels. So you can store 3 rows of tractors
amazing.
Up. It's incredible. And most of that stuff in that building is something they scrapped from another building and figured out how to make. So he just continued that sort of home build mentality. And it's just great, just really great.
Yeah, for sure. I also heard that there's a story of a very special Farmall tractor that was found in an Iowa field and was painted silver. Can you tell me about that story?
Oh, absolutely. So when Farmall made their 100,000th tractor, I got to think about that. They decided to make a big deal out of that. So I'm sorry, it's 500,000. Might have to check that. But this tractor, they had a big event at the factory. They painted it silver. They had Cyrus McCormick Jr. drove it off. The president at the time of the company drove it off the line, and they had a huge event. They probably had 3,000 people at the place, press, photos, everything. That tractor then disappeared. A man named Ryan Peters bought a bunch of junk tractors out of a guy's pasture in Iowa, and he hauled it all home, and it was in his place for a while. And he was poking around, and these are things there, you might have a salvageable frame on that one, an engine on this one, and, you just take bits off them. And he was looking at one of them, and he found a 5001 serial number. And he started digging around and realized this was that tractor.
Imagine that.
Yeah. So he's restored it, and we photographed it, and he told the story about it. It's fantastic.
Wow. Are there any memorable people that along the way that you've researched and you've really grown to love in tractor history? You never met them, you don't know them, but you just feel like you have a bond with them?
I'd say Alexander Legg. He grew up on a farm in Nebraska, hardworking kid, and his dad was an immigrant, and he was able to build a pretty successful ranch. And then Alex actually was being a cowboy, and his mother got sick. Was very close to his mom, so he came back and took a job with IH as a collecting bills. And he was very, very good at collecting bills. And he was a mix of tough and helpful. There were stories about he would go and talk to the person, because back then you bought all your machinery on credit. And, farming being farming, you never know, right? Is a check coming? Is it not? No idea. So in a lot of years they didn't. And when they didn't, you had to go collect the bill. And that was a really big problem for tractor manufacturers. But he would go talk to the farmer and find out what was going on. And in one case, he went, and the banker wouldn't give the farmer any money. So Alex went down to the bank with the guy, got the money.
Wow.
Another case, one of the great Alex stories. So he went, and there was a very stubborn gentleman, and he had not put up money as collateral. He had put up his prize bull as collateral. And so Alex showed up. He said, "Well, where's the bull?" The farmer says, "Over there." And he's pointing to a flat piece of ground. There's nothing there. He said, "What do you mean?" He says, he said, he died last spring, and I buried him right there. And Alex said, "Well, let's get a shovel. We're at least going to get some money out of those bones at the rendering plant." At which point the farmer said, "Well, if you're going to be like that, I guess I'll give you the money."
Oh, wow.
Because, he was alive.
Yeah, that's hilarious.
It's great. But Alex also just became a guiding light for the company. Certainly, even as late as like the Farmall tractor story about Bert Benjamin, he was very personally involved with Bert. Alex was very, very smart. He had this ability to go from growing up as a farm kid in Nebraska in the middle of nowhere to Chicago and working with the McCormicks. And those were, that's always two different places, but they were two different universes in that day.
I guess.
The McCormicks were marrying Rockefellers. Their personal affairs were part of the gossip columns. They were essentially celebrities and living in very, very narrow sort of Victorian age circles. And here's this farm kid. But he was so smart and so good at just stating his mind and knowing when to be tough and when to be gentlemanlike, that he became the McCormick's favorite, and eventually they made him leader of the company. And much of the smart decisions they made, when you look back at the papers and the letters and things, you can see it's his voice that was a good guiding light. So that's one that there's a number, but that's a guy that I just admire so much.
Yeah, I can see why he's so inspiring. That's amazing. And so in your travels, the photography and making these stories, what's the most unique or unusual tractor you've ever come across?
So it's my personal favorite is I really love the tractors from the very early days, from the teens and the 20s. And I particularly love tractors that haven't been painted. So when they, and somebody told me this a long time ago, and it's a line I've used over and over, which is you can put shiny paint on a machine in a week, but it takes a century to get that patina, that something that's been out and it just has a look and its character that I love. There is it's a Titan 45 horsepower that is owned by Louis Bice, a man here in Texas. And the tractor has never been painted and is in fantastic condition, but it is very, very, I mean, it's so weathered. Every bit of it is got a little character to it. It's got this kind of a brown color that's just beautiful. And the tin on it, over the years, the family that owned it, people would carve initials and messages and all kinds of things. So the tin is literally, and it starts in I believe in the 19-teens, if I remember right, and goes up into the 50s and 60s, that people would write things on this big, big old beast. And it is just a beautiful, beautiful machine. And I like to use artificial lighting. I like to blend artificial light with beautiful evening light, because that way you can see the machine, but you get, that dramatic lighting, and that combination is, a big part of what I do. And that machine just, the light kind of absorbed, and beautiful, beautiful. That, no question, in terms of a machine with character that I just adored and visually liked.
Where can people find pictures of that?
You should check out the Octane Press blog. If you search for Titan 45, you'll find it there. It will be used prominently in Farmall Century. So I photographed that a few years ago, and I'm like, okay, I believe it's the title page. So as you open it up, you'll see that big old beast.
Wow. And I'm sure you've met so many collectors over the years. Do you have any advice to give somebody who's interested in getting into antique tractor restoration or collection?
Absolutely. Go find your local club. The clubs are just full of the most wonderful, sharing, giving people. And they will help you out and figure it out. So you also, in this day and age, the Red Power discussion board is a very good place, and there's tons and tons of Facebook groups. So if you're more of a digital Denzian, those are good ways to go. But getting to know your local clubs are great. For any kids out there, the FFA has a great tractor restoration competition. I think Delco Remy is still sponsoring it. It's really well done. If you want to get involved in that, I just think what they're doing is phenomenal. And I see these kids that come out of it and they've learned how to use their hands and restore something old and analog. And I just think it's a fantastic experience.
Great advice. And you've said before that the digital world would not have evolved without the farm tractor. So what do you actually mean by that?
So if you go back to, let's say, 1820s or so, right? 80%, 90% of us as human beings are subsistence farming. That's what everybody's doing, right? So that only started to change once we had farm mechanization. So as all these tools came on, we had less and less and less of us farming. It also changed. It allowed people to both, well, I don't know if the farmers will say that they have a lot of leisure time, but they have some. And certainly in the cities, all of a sudden people were in different situations. So what I mean by that is Steve Jobs wouldn't have had time to be in his garage messing around with circuit boards if all of us were spending our time gathering food and just surviving. So the whole transformation, our culture transformed because of farm technologies. So
yeah, I love growing my own food, and I just have a 1/4 acre property right now, and I grow as much food as I possibly can. And it's so much work. And I'm always like, oh, if I didn't have to work so much, I could grow more food. And I think, well, that's what we used to do like 100 years ago.
Right. And for us, it's
yeah, it's like opposite now.
it has changed. It has changed. Yeah.
That's so funny.
So it's super fun. But I'm sure there was some of that pleasure too of, whenever you whether you hunt and get the food yourself or you grow it yourself, it makes it taste that much better. So
yeah, for sure. And we're going to get into tractor color from a few different perspectives now.
Okay.
Why do you think tractor color has meant so much to so many generations of farmers now?
So I do have a theory on that, and I've wondered about that too. And one thing, I've done work, especially with collector motorcycles and cars as well, and there's a difference. So obviously, the motorcycle and car people love their vehicles. We all know people that do, but there is the depth of connection I see with tractor people, and so often, if I meet someone and they look at a book, we start talking, and they really start thinking back, they'll tear up. There's just really powerful emotions there. And what I thought about is, okay, we loved our cars, we love our motorcycles, but they don't feed our families. Right. And we don't spend 8, 10, 12, 20 hours on that machine. There is such a deep bond, I think, between farmers and their machines. And if you go back to the tractors of the 50s and 60s, a lot of people remember, they were very, very, very analog. And you really had to know there's a lot of little weird switches that if you don't know where it is, you're just done, Yeah. So I think some of the bond, though, has to do with feeding a family, being so tied to your business and your life that I think that means, and then the color feeds into that, because whatever color it was, same thing as the tractor, right? My family's red. Okay, that's it. That's that same trigger of remembering childhood, growing up, and all these things.
Oh, that's great. And what role do you think that brand loyalty will have on the farm going into the next few decades with, there's fewer farms, meaning fewer decision makers, but larger farms. So how do you think that's going to play out?
Boy, I don't know. A part of me thinks that it'll become a little more agnostic and a little more pragmatic, but I don't know. It hasn't changed, that people will be just like, all right, because I've met plenty of farmers that are like, yeah, I'm going to get a deer for this because I like this feature, and I'm going to get a red one for that. But I don't know. Those roots are so deep. I'd ask you the same question. What do you think? You talk to a lot of people about that.
I know.
You think it'll change?
I think it'll always be there. I think it's grown to people that aren't on farms now, and it's kind of expanded, right? So it's not just on farms anymore. That's what I see. Yeah. I'm always curious to know what everybody else thinks. Yeah.
Yeah. Then, right. Your lawnmower or your whatever it might be. Yeah. You still have
the art in your kitchen, and mm-hmm. And then from the manufacturer's perspective, right? That's what I always like to pick their brains too about this. With big corporations now owning so many opposing brands, do you think that they'll be able to preserve the loyalty even when somebody goes, yeah, well, they own those two companies, right?
I'll tell you, at least definitely from a perspective of the companies I've seen, I think they'll be much better at it. So I think Case IH in particular learned very hard lessons with JI Case and International Harvester, and that blend, was very difficult, and they'll admit now that they wouldn't do what they did these days. And then when they had the New Holland Case IH, I feel like they did a lot better job. And I think there, at least, they really have come to understand that they have subgenres and they need to preserve each one. Look at Steiger. I think there's been a really nice job done with Steiger. That name is alive and it still has meaning, 40, 50 years later. So I think companies understand it better. Now, I might say if deer absorbed someone, I'm not sure they would, just because they never did it. So,
Right.
I mean, they brought in other brands, but deer is deer. So they haven't had to face that. So I think it would depend on the company and the corporate culture, but I do think there's some better understanding of that.
Right. And I've had, New Holland in one episode and Case in another episode with different people from the companies. And both were like, no, we're separate. We will work together and have team building together sometimes, but we're separate brands. We represent separate things. And so they are very intentional on making sure that it's run differently and preserving that loyalty. So that's what I see with those two companies anyway.
Yeah. I think they're very, very, very good at it. And there's distinctions. I mean, New Holland's, they got their own thing. So yeah.
And another way to look at it, it would be for the next generation of kids, community identity. It's been a huge factor for Tractor Color loyalty. Your Tractor Color is like a sports team also, right? That announces your solidarity with this community. So do you think that this younger generation coming up will embrace that community mindset too?
Yeah, I do. With the younger ones, I think you definitely do see that. Certainly the kids that I've met, and quite a few of them, the FFA kids or kids at shows or readers. I've had a number of young readers that are just amazing and knew more about the book than I did almost. There's an 8-year-old kid I will never forget, but he had already made his decision. He was ready. And I think your analogy of sports teams is really good. If you grow up and you're a Steelers fan or you're a Niners fan, I mean, that sticks. If you're, I think somewhere in that 8 to 15 range, it just sticks and it doesn't really go.
Yeah. As a Canadian, born Canadian, and my hockey team will always be the Leafs. So that was my dad's hockey team. And now I live in Florida, but my hockey team is still the Leafs. It always will be. Yeah.
Absolutely. I was rooting for y'all too. I'm a little disappointed, but yeah. It becomes, I totally understand. I grew up in Wisconsin. So, Green Bay Packers are imprinted on your collar. It's just,
for sure. Yeah. So, aside from the books we've already talked about, what other books do you have out there that you've written that would be of interest to this audience?
There is a book, John Deere Evolution, which talks about, it's the entire history of John Deere, but a lot of modern stuff. A lot of good stuff in that I would recommend. We have a book called Revolutionary Red Tractors, which is designed for kids 8 to 12. It takes you through the key technological changes in the farm tractor from the steam engine up to today. Highly recommend that. We just actually 2 days ago won our 31st Independent Book Publishing Award for that particular book for the interior design. And that's a really neat book that especially if you have a kid that's a gearhead, is ideal. Or we like to say kids 8 to 80 because a lot of adults really enjoy it as well. There's a lot of basic concepts that are explained that not everybody knows, and a lot of great photos and history. And it's just a wonderful, somewhat lighter book. And I do have a book called Tractor, which is the 160 most important tractors over the course of history. It's a little smaller, a little cheaper. If you don't want a more expensive book, those I think are in the $20, $25 range. So you can get into our line of tractor books for a little less. Check it out, see what you think.
Yeah. And where can people find your books?
Our books are available anywhere books are sold. But you also can go to octanepress.com. We have everything there. We encourage people to check out your Case IH dealership. They often stock our books, but any bookstore in the country you can walk in, and if they don't have it, they can order it. So.
Nice. And do you normally go to farm shows too around the country?
This year in particular, we do generally go to a couple. This year we will be at Red Power in Grand Island, Nebraska in June, and then we'll be at the Farm Progress Show and also at the Half Century of Progress Show. So and there's a chance we might go to Husker Harvest. So we're hitting a fair amount of shows for us this year.
Yeah, nice. Busy schedule. And my last question is always, but I think we know the answer. What color is your tractor and why?
Yeah, and we did cover that, and I have to confess it's red. It's just because of my deep ties to I have so many friends at that company, so many people that I really admire and have been helpful. And so yeah, I'm a red guy now.
That's amazing. Big surprise at the end here.
Right.
I always like getting the implement dealers or the manufacturers, and then you just put them on the spot. What color is your tractor? And they're like, well, I don't want to say.
Right. No, I don't want to confess.
Yours was easy. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. What a great conversation. And I got to learn some new things. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me, Chrissy. It's a real honor. I really appreciate it.
And
thanks what you're doing, by the way.
Thank you.
I like that message. It's great.
Awesome. And thanks so much to all who are watching or listening. If you want to learn more, the links are provided in the show notes. And I'd love it if you shared this episode and subscribe to NorthAmericanAg.com so you never miss out on an episode of What Color is Your Tractor? And have a great day.